Hi, and welcome back to the second part of the 15th Busiversary. This is Flying Focus Video Collective's 15-year anniversary program, and I'm Dan Handelman. I've been with the group since we started. We've done an awful lot of work in 15 years on a real shoestring budget, and not a lot of all-volunteer nonprofit groups make it this far. So we're really happy to celebrate this milestone with you, our viewers, and we thank you for watching. We also want to thank Portland Community Media, where we've produced the bulk majority of our shows over the last 15 years. And we want to note that they are celebrating their 25th anniversary this year while we're celebrating our 15th anniversary. Now, PC?
If you saw part one, you noticed that we're not corporate slick in our presentation, but we are intent on getting the information out and accessible, the kind of stories that are not carried on corporate media. We are activists. We have a motto of voicing the voiceless and using video as a tool for social change. Please join us. Don't just watch. You can do this, and here's how.
Yeah, we'll have some information up on the screen now about how you can call us or write to us on email. And if you want to grab a pen, if you don't get it right now, it'll come up a few more times during this half-hour show. And you can also look us up on the web at www.flyingfocus.org. So this year I produced 4 shows, and I've also been busy doing a lot of the background work that keeps Flying Focus going. But the first 3 shows I worked on were all about war and peace issues, and actually much of the focus was on the American occupation of Iraq and the so-called war on terrorism. The first show was made up of 2 different segments, 2 events that I taped in Albany, Oregon, which is about 75 miles south of Portland, and it's a pretty conservative community, so it was quite a big deal when Military Families Speak Out decided to organize a peace rally there. They had an event in Monteith Park that included speakers, music, and information opposing the war. The second half featured the Northwest Veterans for Peace, who are from Portland, and they have marched in Albany's Veterans Day Parade for almost every one of the last 15 years. And as you'll see, they received a mixture of catcalls and cheers, as they were the only peace delegation in Oregon's largest Veterans Day Parade.
Flags and banners waving high, bayonets against the sky, and every time that bugle calls, one more silent soldier falls. So won't you bring the troops home now?
The current administration and the corporate media would like us to think we are succeeding in Iraq. They hold up shining examples as proof of our success. But even the tame media cannot hide the carnage. At first, I thought that once we had broken the country, we needed to stay to fix it. But the longer we stay, the worse the consequences. American troops are the magnets that attract death and destruction to the Iraqi people.
Welcome home, buddy. You guys are awesome! Roll! Peace! Peace now!
I taped the next show at Amnesty International's USA National Conference, which was held here in Portland this past April. The panel included a lieutenant colonel who's still in the National Guard, but who was willing to criticize U.S. policy, as well as talking about some Iraqis who got disappeared into the Kurdish prison system. He credits the media for helping him get that story out and finding the missing Iraqis. Also on the panel was a magazine writer who focused on torture issues and a staff member from Amnesty. Most of what you're going to hear about in the clips, though, is them talking about how Iraq really has nothing to do at all with the so-called war on terror.
It's funny about the war on terror and Iraq, the connection. I mean, it's true that, like, if you look at Iraq, there's a lot of different ways that people make the connection there. You know, there's Camp Ganshi, named after one of the firefighters who was killed. There in Kuwait, there was Camp Flight 93, you know, commemorating the United 93 flight. Who knows where it came from, but the connection was always there for the soldiers, and not for anybody who, you know, who really thought about these issues.
I'll add too that one of the things, especially if you're in the media, I think you see this, that the operative word, at least at the national level of the U.S. and a number of other governments, is obfuscate. Do everything you can to confuse the situation. Instead of focusing on the information that comes out on the warrantless wiretap program, we focus on who leaked the information. That becomes the key story, not the underlying problem.
We've always come from the position that there are internal armed conflicts, there are international armed conflicts, and then there's countries where there's no conflict. So the idea that there's sort of the rolling war on terror that, according to the U.S. government, exists basically in every place at all times, including in the U.S., that allows them to sort of invoke this whole regime of, sort of the laws of war, except for only the ones they really choose to use because they don't really apply to Geneva Conventions, is extremely troubling for Amnesty.
In this next show, I was able to feature 5 people of the cloth, as it were, ministers, a priest, a rabbi, and they spoke at an Ash Wednesday news conference against war in general, and specifically the Iraq War. The thing I liked about this show is that even though it doesn't bring in a huge variety of religions, it does show that not all Christians are aligned with the so-called religious right, and at least some Jewish people are able to see flaws in the U.S. policy in Iraq.
We know we cannot make a big deal about celebrating Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we do make a big deal about it, and we cannot ignore his legacy of peacemaking and his courage to speak out against the war of his age, Vietnam. Clearly for us at Ainsworth, I cannot ignore the abuse of power, the buildup of militarism, the insane draining of resources from education, from healthcare, from the safety net protecting our most vulnerable people to feed the greedy war machine.
The prophet Isaiah said thousands of years ago, "And they will come to my holy mountain and rejoice in my house of prayer. My house will be a house of prayer for all people." And he didn't say it would be a Jewish synagogue or a Christian church or a Muslim mosque or anything. It would be my house, God's house.
They implied that Saddam was connected to 9/11 and terrorists. Instead of finding a connection, we created a pool of terrorism by our very presence as an occupying army.
So that kind of covered the war and peace shows that I did this year, and this show is kind of in the media and communications category because it features Norman Solomon, a guy who once lived in Portland and writes a nationally syndicated column and a number of books, and mostly they focus on how the media presents issues in a biased manner. We frequently do shows on Flying Focus about how to be a better consumer of mass media, and what's great about Norman Solomon is that while he's teaching about that, he also is substantively picking apart the flaws of current U.S. militarism, and he does that by contrasting what's going on now with what's happened in the past. He, in this clip that you're going to see, points out that TV reality is very different from the harsh realities of war. And I want to point out that this show was taped by a volunteer named Jeff Bugbee, and I want to thank him for taping this.
Most people in most positions, for various reasons, where they work, where their headspace is, they don't really think it's an option. And that is to call things by their real name. To say that pro-war is pro-war. To say that terrorism is terrorism, whether the people are being shattered on September 11th, 2001 in the World Trade Center, or in Baghdad in April of 2003 with U.S. cruise missiles. If we can't say the unmentionable, that the emperor has no clothes, we simply become part of that system, the war-making system. And then there's the layer, and I'll close with reference to this, the antiseptic, the numbing, the anesthesia, the distancing from the human realities, what's being done in our names with our tax dollars. You know, this myth about television brings war into our living rooms. Can you think of anything more preposterous? Comparing the experience of watching footage on television with being in a war where fear and death is the essence. Comparing the shots all around you to watching the shots that have been edited by some producers and editors at a network studio and saying that's equivalent. It's just a conceit, and Bush has used this. He said it's painful watching this war on television, as though that means we know what war is.
Here's another piece on the media coverage, and it's Adam speaking on his involvement with it. What did you do on this piece, Adam?
Well, the producer, Joshua Eichen, couldn't be here tonight, but I helped prepare it for playback. It's a show called, it's about the media and media literacy. It's called You Are What You Media. And it features a speaker named Vanessa Hughes, who's from the Northwest Media Literacy Center. So it's basically a brief intro into media literacy, which is about analyzing mainstream mass media. So let's take a look at a clip.
Let's define our terms. Mass media, or media as we commonly refer to it, is something that's created by a few for the consumption of many. A few people create it to be consumed by many. And what is the most difficult thing about mass media or media at the moment is that the backlash of communication, or how do you talk back to media, is becoming more complicated. Calling your bank and speaking to a person is complicated these days. So when you're driving down I-84 and you see that big billboard for Rockstar energy drink, who do you talk to? Do you call up Rockstar? Do you call up the advertising agency? Do you call up the model if she actually exists or is not a computer-generated image of a person? So how do we communicate back with media? You're walking down the street and there's a T-shirt that's coming towards you that is, I don't know, pick a company. Thank you, Nike, American Eagle, Abercrombie and Fitch. This is created by a small number of people for the consumption of many. So this is how we are now defining mass media, or media as it's come to ubiquitously be called. So the average American child, and this statistic is a little bit old, watches 4 hours of television a day, which translates into 28 hours a week, 2,400 hours a year, which is about 18,000 hours of TV by the time they graduate high school.
This time we're talking about a piece that involves racial profiling. It's the community talking and listening to the police. And Adam, what do you remember it being about?
Well, you were the one who taped it and I produced it, edited it. So basically it was a discussion about police racial profiling, and everyone agreed it was wrong, the police and the community, but there was a disagreement as to whether it's a problem in Portland. But we're going to see a couple clips of a couple community members who put it into a greater context, put racial profiling into a greater context, and also a short clip of Chief of Police Rosie Sizer. So let's take a look.
I want to say, first of all, that I don't blame the police for this condition, but, the unemployment is higher among people of color, black people. We're exporting jobs overseas. We're the last hired, first fired. Therefore, you've got a lot of people with idle time, and so... And the other thing, which I believe, is that we have a country that recognizes that prisons are moneymakers. Okay, we have corporations going into prisons precisely because they can use cheap labor, just like they use on the plantation. For those of you who don't know, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution says that slavery is illegal except for prisons. So, except if you're incarcerated.
If you ask them what's the biggest problem in your life and in your neighborhood, is it fraud that you don't know about, or is it the guys on the corner day in and day out dealing drugs and degrading your neighborhood? And so we are honestly under tremendous pressure to do something about that.
The police culture so much buys into the idea of criminal profiling. It's okay to profile, it's just not okay to racial profile. But there are legitimate reasons why you would profile. And I want to question that. Do we get to profile the people that stay out at night? I mean, are there some legitimate reasons, but race isn't one of them? Or is the whole concept of profiling really wrong?
We're back here with Barb Greene, and I can't remember how long you've been with Flying Focus.
I've been with Flying Focus for 11 years now.
Oh my God.
And I'm really happy to be here for the 15th
anniversary.
We're glad to
It's a
have you
great day.
here, still here. So we're going to look at a clip about a woman from Burundi,
A Hutu woman.
Hutu woman, and she's speaking about options of nonviolence.
She's speaking about options of nonviolence in response to genocide, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
What she's been involved in.
Right. Some really horrendous things have happened to her family. She's now a professor in the United States and dealing with issues here and in a nonviolent way.
Conflict often ensues when the intersection of different cultures brings together people or groups that lack cultural competence. Culturally competent individuals understand the cultural history of their communities and society. They have an informed global perspective that inspires and shapes their worldview, dispositions, behaviors, as well as their interactions with other people and their environment. Culturally competent individuals must also exhibit certain attributes. They are caring and have empathy for their fellow human beings across cultures. They are firm individuals with the capacity to confidently approach change and manage complexity. They are not intimidated or frightened by cultural differences. They value different cultures. They are agents of societal transformation in words and in deeds. So what I would like you to start doing now is to start asking yourselves individually, am I culturally competent? Do I have the skills? Do I possess the knowledge and the attributes that are really needed in order to become a culturally competent individual?
Okay, now we're back with Yvonne Simmons. And Yvonne, how long have you been with Flying Focus?
From the very beginning.
Wow, 15 years. It's a long time.
And it's been a good time.
Yeah, it has. And so what's this next show about?
This next show is a group of women from different parts of America, from Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's leadership team on the Middle East. And it's dealing mostly with Israel and Palestine. It's challenging U.S. policy and building peace in the Middle East. And the women, there's two of the women from out of town that are speaking, and also there's the Wolf Vigil downtown. There's
how often do they have those?
Every Wednesday.
Oh, every Wednesday.
Yeah, from
That's
12
great.
to 1 at Pioneer Square. The first is we can't change anything. Then underneath is the women bringing a ladder, and underneath is the women painting out the apostrophe and T, and at the end it says we can't change anything.
Being Jewish, I have a very particular interest in the area, and I want to make it clear that I've come a long way from when I was a young Zionist and thought that if Israel was safe for the Jews would be safe all over the world, and that's not what happened. And I realized that if Jews were to be safe anywhere, they had to be safe everywhere. And then I began to realize that Jews weren't going to be safe anywhere unless everybody was safe everywhere.
To look at the fact that the Palestinians are very poor, they're starving, the 80% unemployment, they have no means to go get a job, and more they are behind this wall like in prison. And many Israelis feel that this is totally unjust and it's not how they would like to see. So they want to end this occupation very much.
This next program is from one of your trips to Peru, right?
Yeah, to Las Lomas, the garbage dump outside Lima. And this one is the opening of a youth center for the working children. Because some of the kids don't work on Las Lomas, but some of them work from 4 or 5 years old. And this youth center has just like one computer, one drum, one of everything, and they have a soccer team. And it was a great day, you know, we had a celebration and all dignitaries came, and which for that area, we had to wait 3 hours. Everybody's late in Lima. And also there's some, we in the university near the NGO office, who I work with in Peru, there are a lot of stray dogs and they were going to kill them. And so we said if we spay and neuter them, and this is a clip, the clip is of spaying and neutering of these dogs in a classroom in the university.
Great. Let's take a look.
This is the opening of Yacht, which is a youth center that was built by the youth and people from the NGO Centro Processo Social. And we're outside Lima in the largest garbage dump at San Benito di Caraballo. Hola. What the children do, they have axes and they carve stones and sell them to make a living. And it says Yacht, the youth center, and for the development of San Benito. There's a lot of stray dogs in Lima. They're all over. People love dogs there. And this is a university near the NGO office, which is in San Martin de Porres. And the university said they were going to kill all the dogs. They have 32 stray dogs there and some puppies. And so we got together and said if we vaccinate them and spay and neutering them, can they stay here? And this is what's happening here. We've already vaccinated them one day.
Okay, now this program is from a different trip you made to Peru, right?
Yeah, the end of 2005 and the beginning of 2006. And it shows these women in Independencia, which is a very poor neighborhood of Lima. And we're having a meeting about how to deal with the violence, the domestic violence and the violence against children and the use of drugs in their neighborhood. It's very dangerous to live there. And you know, they're wonderful people, and we ended up singing a song, you know, which we translated into Castellano. They're really very nice. The other part of that is in Las Lomas, where the garbage dump is, and it's in their clinic. It's like huts and very, very crude. They hardly have any medicines there, and you know, there's so many illnesses like TB. Malnutrition, lead poisoning,
but the second half is a little more.
Yeah, it's celebratory. It's Human Rights Day, December 2005, and the children have their own program, and there's dancing and singing, and there's about 500 children doing crafts.
Wow!
And at the end, it's to do with the Christmas presents and party, and the children are putting on a show.
Great. Let's take a look.
This is the beginning of a women's community center in one of the women's houses in Independencia. And here's How Could Anyone Ever Tell You in Castellano, which you'll hear later.
Pero vean ustedes si pueden el lunes, tienes problemas con el lunes. Bueno, espero que no, depende.
This is the doctor, the main doctor at the clinic in Las Lomas, and he's talking about the problems that the people and the children have, and the elderly. Many children have lead poisoning because there's a metal factory in the neighborhood, and 57 children are affected, and they don't have medicine to give them to counteract the lead poisoning. They give them vitamins, which we have taken over, and which don't cure the problem, but it does help their malnutrition. And on stage, you can see Diego. Diego has polio and only uses one arm which he uses to go through garbage with his father to sort it out. Anyway, this day is where the children are taking control and promoting Human Rights Day for all children. They were very excited getting this all together. At the festival, the children voted for the most important human right to them. And the first three were first education, second right to life and freedom, and the third human right was health. And here we're at another Chocolatada with about 40 or 50 families, I think they are now, that live on the side of a mountain and are very poor.
Hi, I'm Moss Drake, and I've been working with Flying Focus for about 15 years. And wow, that seems like a lifetime. It's been a long time and a lot of shows. And I haven't produced any shows recently, but I have been directing the Flying Focus Busiversary for the past 6 years. And I've also been helping out in the office, doing the newsletter, and generally supporting Flying Focus. If you want to work with us or support us in any way, please call at 503-239-7456 or 503-321-5051, or email us at ffvc@flyingfocus.org. Well, that wraps it up for the 15th Busiversary. And thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in every week at this time for the Flying Focus Video Bus. Thanks.